working with thousands of agents, right?
Yep.
How do you think about kind of making their lives easier or better or more productive? Like, what does success look like for you? Hello, everyone. Hello, Internet. Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Facebook Friday. I'm your host, Keith Watts, head of industry for Facebook. And today I am super excited for our guest because, and Libby and I were just talking about this, we've known each other since 2008. And we actually started at Facebook on the same day. Which I kind of thought that was the case. And Libby's like, no, it was November 3rd,
a faded day, November 3rd, 2008.
I remember.
Changed my life, man.
Changed, yeah. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember so excited to get the job at Facebook. And they do all the interviews in like the cool building because we were in downtown Palo Alto. And then we started and we were in this like converted, it felt like a dentist office on Lytton.
Oh no, it was a dentist office.
Was it?
It was a dentist office. I tell people all the time, that's so funny. People are like, where'd you work at Facebook? Like this building or that building that I think now is like Palantir or maybe something else. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, Oh no, I worked on this other building over there with like it had like dirty carpet and like one bathroom.
Next to Form Fitness. Remember?
But it was like, I mean, what a fun adventure. What a career journey, you know?
Yeah, it was amazing. And so I was really, Libby's been on our hit list for a while because she's had such an amazing trajectory in her career and has someone who has deep executive experience on the technology side, but also from your family has deep real estate background. And so making the transition over to Compass, we really wanted to connect with her. So you're the president of West Coast Operations. Am I getting that right?
Of Northern California.
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
the regional president of Northern California and like Tahoe.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. So, and we have just an amazing team. Our president of the West Coast is Kamini Lane, and she and I work together every day, and she's awesome. So I run our Northern California business, which extends all the way to Lake Tahoe.
And then Paul Peterman is another Facebook alum. He's up in Seattle still, right?
Yeah, he was with us in Pacific Northwest and built that team, and he's just a rock star. So yeah, I had the opportunity in the journey to Compass to work with so many amazing former Facebook folks that ended up over there, which is pretty awesome, right? Like it really speaks to how technology, like somewhere like Facebook, right? Like a consumer technology company, a global company, how a lot of the things you learn and the skills you build in working with people and in products that are connecting people, right, lead you down the road to a like total people business.
Yeah.
Right? It's soft tissue business. Like that's what we're in. So.
Yeah. So I want to get into all that, but I think it's really important for the folks listening to just kind of hear your story. And so Libby and I started together in a sales role, right? And then I've basically been in that same organization since then. And Libby's had many, many adventures. I believe the first stop was the chief of staff role, right? For Cheryl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you just kind of walk us through like where you went, because you've been a lot of places. I've been pretty boring.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll start at the very beginning, which is, and you alluded to this, I'm from the Central Valley of California. And so I grew up 90 miles east of San Francisco. And like, it's amazing, right? You can drive an hour and 15 minutes east of the Bay Area, and it's just a totally different world than it is in the Bay Area. And I'm really proud of those roots. You know, on one side of my family, we grow cherries and walnuts and, you know, have been part of the physical land of California's Central Valley and the rich soil there for, you know, decades. And on the other side, my family works in the traditional brokerage business, owns and operates our family's brokerage, which my grandfather started in the mid 1950s. So we can talk more about that and what it was like kind of growing up in that world. But, you know, for me, I've always been around real estate. Like it's just always been part of the dinner table conversation. It's been part of the the dialogue and the discourse of my life and the rhythms of my life. So I'm very comfortable in a real estate office. The first dollar I ever earned was in a commercial real estate office at the front desk. So
nice.
I went to Berkeley. So go Bears for any Cal Bears out there. And then
a lot of Berkeley pride.
A lot of Cal pride. And then I decided I was like, oh, should I go work in real estate? And I thought, well, this is a great time to go look at technology. And I think many of the things I didn't know then, but I know about myself now, is I love working on challenging problems, complex issues. I love diving in and doing things where the learning curve is really steep. And in many ways, that's like super, super familiar to what real estate agents do every day, right?
Yep.
Which is like the most entrepreneurial work and building your business from scratch. And I just have always been about that. And I think it's because I'm around and was raised by people in the real estate business primarily. I went to Google right out of college.
Boo.
And I worked at Google in online operations and sales. And then, as you mentioned, in November of 2008, you and I joined Facebook, and part of that founding sales team, that inside sales crew. And I spent almost 7 years at Facebook, and it was an incredible part of my career journey. I worked on that team for about a year. I was really fortunate to be the business lead to Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, and spent about 3 years in that role, working really closely with Sheryl as the company ramped up, revenue operations and scaling revenue with key advertisers across the world. It was an amazing experience. I spent another 3 years focused on business development and global partnerships, working to onboard some of the world's biggest nonprofits and institutions and exciting public figures to Facebook's platform, and the early days of Facebook pages and all of those things, and even Instagram after Instagram joined Facebook. And it was just an amazing career journey. I mean, and like you've been at Facebook this entire time, there's never a dull moment. You're always growing. You're always shifting. You're always, I think reinvention is like the right word. Someone at Facebook once said, like, if you're not doing a different job every 18 months, you're not totally stretching yourself. And I think that's interesting, right? Like, think about your steps that you've taken along the way in all of the time that you've spent at Facebook, right? There's probably never been, even in a 12-month span, where the job you were doing 12 months ago is the same as the job you're doing today. And so I loved that about Facebook, because coming from a family in the real estate industry where people were like, I've worked for this same company for 20 or 30 years of my career, I was sort of like, wow, you can reinvent yourself. Yep. You can try new things. You can put your hand in different things. And so I've loved that about the experience. I went to Harvard Business School. I left Facebook, went to business school, did an MBA there. It was really fun. I lived in Boston for 2 years, made great friends around the world. I spent the summer back in the Bay Area, focused on meeting great founders and listening to people's pitches on Sand Hill Road, which was like a really fun experience and really energizing for me, and ended up in fintech in 2017. So spent a couple years at SoFi, an amazing company, and working for that team. If you're not familiar with SoFi, definitely check out SoFi.com. Really best known probably in the early days for student loan refinancing entirely online, but today has like a full stack suite of amazing products. And then Compass was calling. And I mean, it's like, there are very few times I think in a person's life and in the span of a career where all of a sudden, like, everything comes full circle. But when that moment hits, there's something about it that's like, oh, I know this is the thing. Like, I know that it brings like everything together. And the more I heard about Robert's vision, Robert Refkin, Compass's founder and CEO, what he envisioned the world to be like for the agent, elevating the prestige and the perspective and the respect that people have for real estate agents in the world and realtors and brokers. I was just amazed that someone had such a customer focus, right? And really believed in the power of the broker, the agent, and how much value they bring to these transactions that are really for people like they're really for most people, the largest financial transaction you'll ever make in your life.
Yeah.
And so because my family, I mean, my dad's a commercial broker, my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, I mean, they're all realtors. I was the one around the kitchen table at Thanksgiving that was the black sheep. Like, they're like, what do you mean you work? Like, literally one time someone, when I first started working at Facebook, and I'm sure you have these stories too, someone was like, what do you mean you work at Facebook? Like, people work at Facebook?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, people do work there.
I would get the question I would get, and I still get, which is hilarious, is like, how does Facebook make money? What do you like,
Yeah. And we've seen that play out on, the national scale in terms of how the knowledge of our government and regulatory bodies and like their relative, expertise in thinking of, how platforms make money.
Exactly.
I think the famous quote is, right, we sell ads.
Yeah.
I think that's the famous quote. But yeah, it's been a really wild ride and fun journey. And I think it's taken me in all these twists and turns from sales, where I had no formal sales background, but probably was around it enough to be able to pick up really quickly, to operations and general management, business development and partnerships. And that's led me to the work that I do at Compass. So I lead our Northern California market. And as I mentioned, Lake Tahoe, which is both sides of California and Nevada. We have thousands of incredible real estate agents in Compass, Northern California. We have offices throughout Northern California, from Monterey, Carmel, all the way to Pleasanton, California, in the East Bay to Marin and wine country, and up to Lake Tahoe. And it's been a wild, really interesting ride. I work with incredible people and amazing sales managers who I learn from every day. And of course, our agents who I'm like so happy to just be able to learn from and soak so much knowledge from every day, and hopefully add something to what they're doing too.
Nice. So one of the things, and thank you for that, because I think it's a really, especially the full circle nature of your story is fascinating, right? What's interesting, because there's been a fair amount of Facebookers that I know personally that have spent some time at Compass, and what's fascinating is like real estate is just such a high passion point for a lot of people, whether they grew up with it or not, right? We even see it on our platform in terms of like content, and it's really, really engaging content. I think that's interesting. I think the other thing that's interesting about your story is because you've pushed yourself to be uncomfortable and take on different roles, right? You've had the opportunity to be around some world-class leaders, right? And so when I think of agents, what's unique about the role of an agent oftentimes is they're the CEO, they're the COO, they're the CMO, they're the chief salesperson, they're the front, they're the person opening the door and letting people into the homes as well. And so like, I'm curious, we think about some of the leaders that you've had a chance to interact with, and maybe we could start with Cheryl. Like, what are those things as you think back on that time, or like that still stay with you that you think would be relevant as agents work to be their own COO?
Yeah. I think it's such a great point. I mean, look, the life of an agent, the work life of an agent, it never ends. It never sleeps, right? Like, I make it a point. I actually don't, when I talk to real estate professionals on the weekend, a lot of times people are like, happy Friday, happy weekend. Because they're going to work.
That's right.
They're getting ready to go show property and go, write up an offer and go deal doctor, like some, massive thing that they're putting together. And gosh, if you know anything about the Bay Area real estate market right now, I mean, it is competitive, and it is a always on environment. So I think your point on you kind of wear all hats is right. And I've been really lucky in my career. One thing that I really try to do at every step of the way is I really think about, and a professor who I had, Young Mi Moon, who I really admire, says this. I always tried to zig where everyone else was zagging.
I like
and
that.
I think some of that comes from like a healthy dose of naivete around, like, I definitely am a risk taker. I have a healthy like appetite for risk. I think I also I'm not afraid to stumble and fall down. I've had lots of stumbling and falling down and lots of no's and doors closed in my face and stuff. So I try to really, temper back that like caution and really just focus on how can I do something? Like, where do I think the world is going? Do I have enough passion to get behind, enough conviction to get behind this, to believe like this is the direction the world is going? And sometimes we put our chips somewhere and it's totally wrong and we pick ourselves up and move on. But, I have worked with pretty amazing leaders. And I like to think that if I had taken the path to zag instead of zig, I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have. One thing a lot of people don't know about me is I started my career. So I really wanted to work in consumer technology. Like, it was so important to me to be able to focus on, like, I wanted to work at a great brand that people knew, that was global, that impacted hundreds of millions or billions of people around the world. Now, of course, when we joined Facebook, that was not the reality of Facebook and its size and the company size and stuff. But obviously now, right, we are, hindsight is 2020 here. And so I wanted to work at Google, and I was an undergrad at Cal. I did my undergrad in business, and Google was hiring a ton of people from Cal, but they were all engineers. And there were not like a ton of people with a profile like mine. And everyone that I knew was going into, ABC, accounting, banking, and consulting. And none of those things really called my name. So I decided, I like went to the Google website, and they get tons of resumes every day. And I was like, what jobs am I qualified for here? And what jobs am I totally, overqualified to do, but like want to do just for the opportunity to like jump in with these folks. And I took a role at Google. I was looking at a bunch of different roles, and I took a role at Google as an executive assistant to an incredible person who, the long story short of that is, like, I worked closely with that person. They were one of the first like 20 or 30 people hired in the advertising business at Google, quickly accelerating up the ladder, took me with them to all these different divisions that they worked in, including Asia Pacific, Latin America markets, still based out of Mountain View, but had the opportunity to interface with all of these super senior executives. I never would have had that exposure if I had taken the other jobs. And that person that I worked hand in hand with for 18 months ended up being a reference for me in my job to go work for Cheryl, because Cheryl had hired that person. And I didn't know Cheryl at Google. So one, I think you got to be willing to do the tough jobs. Like, people ask me, what's the hardest job? Like, this job must be the hardest job. The job I had that was the hardest job of every job I had was being someone's executive assistant, who is like a super hardcore genius, hyper growth, always on executive that's working global markets, that you're like trying to help them figure out how to maximize their time and how to be more effective and more efficient. And I learned how they think and the questions that they ask and how they review presentations and how they prepare. And it was the most helpful and most rigorous preparation I could have had for the jobs that I do now. I'm willing to do the tough jobs, to roll up my sleeves, to get my hands dirty. I'm not afraid to shy away from a challenge. And my bar for great is really, really high. So, a great example of that is I worked for Joanne Bradford, who's an incredible executive in Silicon Valley. You know of Joanne. I worked for her at SoFi. She's an incredible person. Everyone you talk to, when you say, oh, I worked at SoFi, or I, did this, oh, do you know Joanne? Right? She's so incredible. The things that she has taught me in how to connect, communicate, how to nurture your network, how to stay connected to people. And she gave me some really great advice once that was like, hey, you got to be a little kinder to yourself. You're really tough on yourself, and you need to give yourself a break too. That's the kind of advice I would say from great mentors and leaders who knew me really, really well, that I bring with me every day in all the hats that I wear. Because I may not be like the COO, the CMO, the CTO, the CEO, but I've got to be a great coach. I've got to be a great mentor. I've got to be an excellent recruiter. I got to know my audience, right? I've got to be an adept problem solver, a fast thinker. And so everyone from, Sheryl Sandberg to Emily White, Sukhinder Singh, Joanne Bradford, Anthony Noto at SoFi, all of those people, and the things that I've learned from their incredible operating skills and leadership were like left an indelible impression on me, that really shaped like who I am today.
Yeah, you had mentioned being naive or, not looking at the upside versus downside when you're looking at risk. I mean, I would frame it another way, which is like confidence, right? Like, and I've always admired your confidence, whether it is like, being in the same room and stating your opinion to a bunch of executives, including Cheryl or Mark, whoever, like that takes a lot of confidence. And confidence is not just something you're born with, but it's also a skill you develop, right? And so putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and having to step up over and over again, it gets easier, right? And
Yeah.
I've always admired that about you.
But it's so funny because I would say that, and this is so true for agents, right? Like you go out and you go on a listing presentation or you go meet clients or you got this like really tough situation. You got to have the confidence because people want to work with and do business with people that there's some conviction there.
Yep.
Right. That you give them the comfort of, gosh, this person's an expert. This person knows, they have great experience. And someone said to me recently, I was just having a one-on-one check-in and they said, you have a lot of confidence. You have way more confidence than me. This person was saying to me, you have way more confidence. And this is like an amazing business executive, the person who said this to me. And the whole time while they were saying this to me, and when he said that, I thought, oh my gosh, if only you knew.
Yeah.
Right. Like the amount of, and I don't feel that way. Like, I don't feel like I go out and I'm like, oh, I got to build myself up or like, woo, like, let's, I don't do that. Like, that's not part of who I am. But I think communication matters, right? How you communicate and can you articulate things really clearly? I think, again, because I came from a family of real estate agents, these are people who are always putting themselves out there and had to have the confidence. But gosh, there are so many times in my career. I mean, I was nervous before joining this and I'm like, oh, I hope I do well at this for Keith. Like, he's my friend. I hope that this, I'm like, how many people are joining? I mean, we all have that healthy dose of nerves and adrenaline. But I think for me, I really do get energy and I really do get like I get pumped up by the stuff that makes me uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah.
Getting through it.
And yeah, confidence is an interesting one because, it's not a zero sum thing. You can be really confident one aspect of your life and struggle on another, or changing situation to situation. And maybe a better framework is conviction. And I think I've seen that in you through every steps of like, I don't know if this thing's going to pan out, but I believe in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to do everything I can to add to the vision of what we're doing. And I think the best agents also have that. Like, nobody wants to work with an agent that doesn't listen or, thinks she or he is, the best thing. But it's like that shows up with the conviction of like, I want to get you the best price for your home or find you your dream home or whatever. And like, consumers feel that. One of my favorite stories of Cheryl is, so part of the real estate team, we are sister organizations with the auto team. And like, Cheryl would do a trip to Detroit almost annually. Obviously it's because of COVID, been on the hook. And one of the attention to detail she has in terms of the briefs is just through the roof, including, they would go do the Ford and the GM meeting and, and like, she would get different cars because like, I'm not going to pull into the GM I'm not going to go meet with Mary Barra in a Ford. It's just not happening. Right. Even though clearly Mary Barra is not sitting there waiting for Cheryl to come in, but like the attention to detail of like, no, we're going to use the client's product and that we're going to like, I remember the same thing. We'd have a Pepsi meeting or something and they would put in only Pepsi into the area where we're meeting. And like things like that. I think there are lessons for a lot of agents in that. And it's like making your clients feel special and feel like you've taken that extra step, because those are the things, as you think about technology and algorithms and all these things that now agents are competing with, either from a deal perspective or just a mind share perspective. Those are things that are uniquely within the agent's realm, right? And so I'm curious, like in your role, like what does success look like, right? Like, so you're on the hook for working with thousands of agents, right?
Yep.
How do you think about kind of making their lives easier or better or more productive? Like, what does success look like for you?
I mean, I think for all of us at Compass, our focus is the agent at the center of everything. And so when I can empower my real estate professionals with the best support, the best service, the best tools that they can use to differentiate themselves and market themselves in the industry, the best brand that helps amplify whatever they're focused on, whether it's, hey, I sell ultra luxury to like the 200, top top ultra high net worth individuals in the world, or whether it's someone who's like, hey, I'm a relatively new agent. I am, just starting out in this market, but gosh, I have so much conviction and so much passion and tenacity for what I'm doing. I need to be able to provide for all of those segments and that entire spectrum of our real estate professional community, provide real value for them. And so that starts with everything from incredible sales management support, which we're really lucky to have, to all of the amazing staff and support that we have in our offices, and to be able also to be nimble and swift enough to be able to help our real estate professionals pivot, in this case, as part of a global pandemic. I mean, that was a really challenging moment, and it's still really challenging, but the beginning of that moment, I think, what it really demonstrated is, and a lot of my friends at Facebook, talked about, like one day it was, hey, we're work from home. Now there's some implications for that for technology companies, but if your customers are not largely coming into your, into your offices every day, like that's a different thing. The real estate industry, the largest asset class in the world, in many ways had never been forced to be this totally virtual thing.
Yep.
And one thing that we know about real estate professionals is that, again, we're in the soft tissue business. It's a human connection. And so a lot of the effects of the global pandemic, I would talk to our agents and hear from them, they get energy from being around people.
Yep.
So a lot of the policies, which were done for, the public health and safety of our communities and our state and our area, but like the no open houses, at the very beginning, like all offices were shut. And then eventually real estate became that essential. It was named an essential service. It was a really trying and challenging time. And again, it's a lot because it's so driven by people. It's not just driven by like a data center and computers, and you can just take your laptop home and suddenly, you thought you were going to work from home for 3 weeks and it's been, 18 months. And so that, I think, was, for me as a leader, there are a few like very defining moments. I was also like 38 or 39 weeks pregnant when that happened. So I will never forget that, because I was just thinking like, wow, how do we keep our people together? How do we keep our people safe? And I was also thinking about, oh man, I'm bringing a baby into the world here, and what's going to happen? So it was one of those things I'll just never, ever forget what it felt like to be part of that in the real estate industry, with all these people looking at me going, how can you help me?
And so that's interesting, because I think there's two pieces that I'm curious to get your take on, because I think, and you alluded to both, it's like, what are the things we need to put in place from a business perspective to make sure we can still serve our customers, right? So some of it is like, even just like regulation stuff of like working to make sure that they can be essential workers, right? And some of that I would imagine is some like technology piece to like, how do we kind of make the thing that would happen in person more virtualized, or whatever your take is. So I'm curious that, but I'm also curious on the culture / mental health things. So you're talking about these people that they get the most joy out of being in human contact with each other and their customers to drive value for their customers. And that's been either shut down or severely limited, as well as I would imagine a big part of your job is like making sure that the culture of Compass is unique, so people want to stay within that family, right? And so I'm just curious how you thought about both those sides of those things.
So, I mean, I'll start with the people stuff, because I always think the people issues, if we get the people issues right, everything else is really well positioned to succeed and be off the charts. Some of the things that it was interesting because we have so many great real estate professionals in Northern California. And as I mentioned, like we have offices all the way in Monterey, Pebble Beach, and in Tahoe, and as far east as Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore. And in many ways, what we realized coming out of that global pandemic is, we would do some of these like all agent meetings in San Francisco. And I realized like when I'm in those rooms, I can only really touch and see and feel and connect with. I mean, we have probably a capacity there of like 350 people in a ballroom, but we've got thousands of people. And so we turned things virtual to be able to engage on a social level. I mean, remember at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was all those like happy hour, like virtual happy hours.
Yeah.
But we tried to make it really fun for people. We did like a great Compass Bake Off based on the Great British Bake Off on Netflix. And it was amazing. There was one of our awesome real estate professionals had a recipe, these open house chocolate chip cookie recipe. And she's like, I've baked more than 50,000 of these cookies and they're like off the hook. I made them, but we published a cookbook and people participated and they won awards and we did taste tests and had a mixologist and all the fun things that like, it's harder to do them when you have such a big group of people. Our focus was how do we make it hyper local? Keep our people safe and keep our people connected. And that's all that really mattered. And so a connection could mean a quick phone call and not to talk about a deal, but just, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
Right. A quick text message checking in on people, a handwritten note. Those are the little things I think that back in that time of like the beginning of 2020, when we were all dealing with this, this is before vaccinations, before all this stuff, that really matter to people. It's like, how do we keep that connection? And so, I know real estate agents that are like, yeah, I'm not bringing back open houses because I've actually figured out how to not do it.
Yeah.
And other people are like, hey, I'm really excited to do it. And then I think on your first question on, what do we need to do and what do we need to put into place? I mean, look, like we've said at Compass, by next summer, we expect to be the first company to provide our agents with a platform that allows them to facilitate a full transaction in one place without ever having to log on or pay for third-party real estate software. So what does that mean? That means we're constantly evolving, but we're building for the real estate professional, right? We're not building what we believe the future looks like. We're building hand in hand with our agents for what they need and the things they need to do their business to best serve their clients. That's our main focus. And so I think in the work that all of us do, I'm always trying to push my team and they push me on this, right? Can this scale?
Yep.
Right. How would this work if we had someone in a remote office somewhere using this? Right. And would it be different? And would their circumstance be different? And really understanding that personal journey. The closer you can get to whomever your customer is, or for me, the closer I get to my agents. I had an agent text me this morning, hey, I'm going on a listing presentation next week. You wouldn't mind joining, would you? I was like, I wouldn't mind. I'd love to join. One, because it's like, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And I can see there, hey, am I serving you as effectively as I can be as you walk into this really important client meeting?
Yeah. It's that tension between often the most scalable actions are the least valuable. If you think about a client relationship, right? Writing a personal note, or like my agent, who I actually believe is a Compass agent. She's changed a couple of times, but I think she's a Compass agent. Like,
yes,
she's amazing because she, whenever we need her, like we're not going to buy a house for years, and she knows that, and we've told her. But like, if we need her for something, or we need her opinion on something, she will help us, right? And that is extremely unscalable, right? But personalized and super valuable versus like an email, which you could send to one button and reach millions of people theoretically, but like not super valuable. And so I think that's the challenge with technology in such a, what was the term you used? Connective tissue. You kept saying
soft tissue.
Soft tissue. Yeah.
Like the human interaction.
Yeah. And so like finding those balances, I think, are a unique challenge in real estate and it's one of the reasons technology really hasn't fundamentally changed how people buy and sell homes, because every house is unique and pricing is a challenge, and every, local knowledge of the neighborhood is super important, and all those things.
And this is why having an agent, right, who is your partner in this matters so much. The agent matters so much to the success of that transaction. More than 90% of all real estate transactions that take place every year are done with a real estate agent. So, to us, we believe, and again, the agent is at the center. The agent is the person, the real estate professional who helps guide you with all of that local knowledge and expertise. And, our goal is to help provide them with the very best service, the end-to-end, platform needed to take care of any transaction, at Compass.
And so given that, and given that many agents have very, very, very strong opinions, as I'm sure you're aware of, right? Like, how do you think about influencing what Compass is building from a technology perspective? Because, and I'll just, from what I've seen doing these and talking to other leaders in the space, there can be a little bit of a squeaky wheel problem where sometimes they're solving for the loudest people versus the biggest opportunity. And that's always hard in any platform. And so I'm just curious how you think about or leverage data to understand, like, we want to serve the agents, but we need to make sure it's what they want and what they need and what they say they want sometimes aren't perfectly aligned. And how do we kind of find that sweet spot?
Yeah. I think it's really an art, not a science.
Yeah.
And so, of course, like anyone, we look at data. Of course, we do, we talk to thousands and thousands of our agents to understand what they need. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding, right? When you have things that work really well, you hear from people that they're working really well and that they're transforming their business or whatever. And you also hear when they're not working really well. Right. And so I think the key is really to understand the difference between what is like an offhand comment and what's a theme, and crystallizing the thematic stuff and deeply understanding and digging into the thematic stuff. Because if you hear from someone over and over, the door is broken. Hey, that I can't get through there.
Yep.
Hey, the doorknob is locked, right? Like, those are all different phrases and they're saying the same thing, which is, hey, this door is broken. Someone needs to fix it. And so people don't always use the same language. People don't always feel comfortable saying necessarily what they need to tell you. But ultimately, we're looking for, like, what are those thematic things that are going to help our agents grow their business and they're going to add the most value for them. The other thing is, like, there are different times in our company where our platform didn't necessarily provide like something that agents needed. And we hear from one agent, hey, I'm like utilizing this thing and it's working really well for me. And, and we may be building that for the agent to use, but we may, make sure that our sales managers are aware, hey, this person used this and it got them great success. Like, we're here, we're in it. We have the back of our agents. We're trying to help them win no matter what. And if we can really uncover those like thematic nuggets and those crystals of kernels of goodness, it's all about feedback. I mean, Facebook, you guys talk about this all the time, like how important feedback is. And listening is an art as well. And so really listening and asking questions and being curious to dig deep about what it is about this that isn't working for you or is working for you.
Yeah, and it's a good call, particularly for people that, I think the stat that I heard was like the average agent is 55 years old, right? So they're not digital natives, and maybe Compass is slightly different. But if you're talking to someone about technology who doesn't come from that background, that's a different conversation than me and you talking about CRM integrations or whatever. And so being able to translate that, because they know their business better than anyone, and we need to serve that.
Yes.
And so figuring out ways to transition that is super interesting.
Look, when I talk to my agents, I'm very clear. I never start with, oh, I have a technology background. Like, I'm a salesperson, right? Like, the first job I worked in sales at Google. I worked in sales at Facebook. What I do today is sales. I do sales. Like, I've been working in sales since I was negotiating with my dad, or I should say the tooth fairy, for like extra money back in the day, which is a true thing. It's so funny. When I was at SoFi, someone was like, hey, do you have any stories? Like, in your life where you've negotiated, like had a really tough negotiation in your career? And I was mentioning it to my parents. My dad's like, do you remember when you would like negotiate for the tooth fairy money? And I said, no, that can't be true. He said, oh yeah, it's like true. And he pulled out, like, he had all the like letters and all this stuff. And it was funny, but like, that has been the core of what I've done forever. So I never start, like when I'm talking to our real estate professionals, I'm like, how can I help you? I'm a salesperson too. I've worked on commission too. Right. I know what it's like to go out and pound the pavement and like have the conversations with people. I'll never forget when we first worked at Facebook. I mean, there were a lot of conversations in the early days where people were like, I just took this call because I forgot my password and I can't get it.
Yeah.
Or people would go like, I just took this call because my mom's on Facebook. How do I block her? And I remember thinking like, how am I ever going to make my quota?
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people that start at Facebook is like, when I started, we didn't have ads in the newsfeed.
Yeah.
And pages couldn't actually publish to the newsfeed. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was just flyers. It was like those little flyers on the side rail. Or
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, everything evolves. I do think that no matter what generation you're in, it's always a good idea to be really current and up to speed on what's happening in the world. So, again, we try to build for our agent at the center. For example, at Compass, our platform has a digital ads tool. So the digital ad tool allows you to promote listings and generate new leads, and also helps our real estate professionals build their brand. So the data that we look at shows that residential listings that used our digital ads tool spent 18% less time on the market on average than those without. So you can cast a wider net of awareness and generate more listing views. And all of this because you've been doing this for almost a decade and a half now.
So crazy. And I don't think I ever told you, but my mom was a realtor. So that was
I think I knew that. I think I knew that.
So that's kind of how I got
on the East Coast, right?
On the East Coast, yeah. And so there was I have a definitely a soft spot for agents and kind of the entrepreneurial nature. I'm curious. You have such a unique position, right? You're over thousands and you work with thousands of agents, right? And we were just talking about, it's been such an unprecedented 18 months, and unfortunately, we're still kind of in the unprecedented moment. And so I'm curious for the folks listening who may or may not be part of your network, like what are the things that are really inspiring that you've heard from agents and how they've been able to pivot their business to kind of thrive in this moment, right?
Gosh, I've heard so many things and I'm so inspired. And by the way, usually when people ask me, what do you do? My response is always, I work for real estate agents.
Nice.
Right. And so because I do, like, that is what my job is day in and day out. But obviously, if you're asking me to describe like the tactics of my job, I want to tell you like what those are for the purpose of this conversation. I've had agents, as I said, who said, look, I'm never doing an open house again. And some of those people are women, and they're like, hey, for a bunch of reasons, including security and health and safety and the security of my clients, I've just figured out, how I can do this without doing an open house. There are other people, I think, that have, some people went to go stay with family, I think, and then realized, actually, this is pretty great and I can run my business from here. And so they're doing that, right? Or they're getting more time to themselves, or, that trip that they never took, instead of doing the trip, they're like getting away somewhere for, some amount of time. And they're not afraid to walk away from their business because they built in all of these digital hooks to help them keep it running and to help them make sure that it's running really effectively. I think that there's also a dimension of collaboration and cooperation that's super inspiring, and people learning from each other and asking each other for help. I've also loved seeing how people think about the concept of their business and where maybe they can't be the CEO, COO, CTO, CMO, the IT person, the front desk person, where they can't be all of those things anymore because they really want to drill down and focus on one thing with clients. And so because of that, they're saying, hey, I'm looking for a killer assistant who can come in and help me so I can scale my business, and thinking about the business in that way. I think that is such an important mindset and opportunity for people to reinvent like what their business could be and what it looks like. And so those are some of the things that have been, I think, really very inspiring to me. And then just the like attention to detail and the data, right? Like our agents know their numbers back and forward. They're able to provide like the most expertise the most detail, the most hyper local kind of information to their clients. And I love that about the real estate professional, because again, it's like, you know, you want to be able to be a partner with someone in this search that is a really important financial transaction for you and your family. And so being able to have that partnership matters so much.
And not even that, it's an emotional, I mean, literally where you're gonna, like, in a lot of cases, raise your kids, right? And so like that's really important. And I think you hit on an important kind of silver lining to what we've all been going through, is like, because we've had to do things differently, I think there's been challenges along the way, but things that we never thought would be possible are coming up, right? The idea that, you know, you could never do an open house again. I think 18 months ago, most realtors are looking at you and thinking you're crazy, right? And now it's or hiring an assistant who's in Idaho, right? Something like that, because, you know, maybe it's a cheaper, you don't have to pay a Bay Area salary to someone and that works for you or whatever. Like there's all these things that are opening up and people are rethinking things, and it's super exciting.
It is exciting, you know, and I think about that all the time. 18 months ago, if we had asked like the top CEOs of, you know, the top 20 companies in the world, hey, or in the United States, hey, you're going to turn your entire business work from home in the next 2 weeks. I mean, do you think that they would have all said, oh yeah, we can totally do that? I don't think so, because I don't think that you would place any kind of bet on commercial real estate if you really believe that. Right? There's all of these like notions and ideas that people have about how culture is built, how important the physical workplace is. And those things are still really very important. People have a little bit more flexibility now as hybrid work emerges and people rethink their priorities. And this is like these moments in time and in our lives, these are shifts for people where they rethink everything.
Yep.
Their priorities, who their partner is, what they're doing, how they spend time. I mean, there are so many inspiring stories. You talk about agents, you know, not just in business, like in their personal lives. You know, I bumped into one of our real estate professionals in Berkeley a few weeks ago, and she said, I have made such an amazing change. I moved east of the Bay Area to be closer to my family. I'm loving the community. I'm having so much fun there. There's other people that are like, hey, I got into shape. I started working out and I was like driving around less. So I had a lot more time to cook for myself and work out, and I got into better shape. Like those are all the things too. The personal really matters in this. And I've loved seeing kind of that level of dedication and inspiration that has come out of this, like a really dark time.
Yeah, no, it's great to see. I wanted to touch on one thing before we close up, because one of the things I feel like you've always done a great job of, I feel like, Libby, I'm like a fan and a friend. I don't know what that term is, but like
first friends and then Facebook fan.
Facebook fan. Yeah. So I feel like, you know, you've always been a champion for you've worked with some amazing leaders, some of them women, some are not, but you've also been a big fan of just supporting women as they're coming up. And I think, you know, for all of us, mentorship is such an important piece. And I'm just curious how you think about that, especially when you look at, you know, most agents are women, and what does that look like? And as a women executive yourself, is there a different lens that you look on as you think about mentorship and helping people grow their careers?
Yeah, you know, it's so important, I think, to be able to give back. And I think about this in the context of really one, like everyone, right? What can I do to give something to someone that's either a source of inspiration or confidence for them or learning for them? And of course, you know, I'm really dedicated to, you know, working with various communities, women, people of color, right? You know, all to be able to give back in those ways to people that are not necessarily, you know, they don't necessarily have the access, so to speak, to the network that I have access to, or the people that I've built, or make introductions. Those things matter a lot to me, because they might be something I can do that takes a moment of my time and is relatively simple, but it could mean the world to them, right? And helping them think about how to, you know, alternative sources of fundraising for a startup idea, or, you know, how to think about a career journey. So I mean, of course, real estate is like a really very interesting. And if you haven't, and you guys are interested in, on this call, I mean, really take a moment to understand like the history of women in real estate. Like the real estate industry is dominated by women. As of 2008, 70, approaching 70% of all realtors are female. And Trulia had a study years ago that there were more women real estate professionals in every state than male real estate professionals. And, I think there's a lot of history there around like how women became real estate brokers in the early 20th century. And, many of them were banned from local real estate board membership, which is a requirement to be able to practice selling real estate. So today, if you think about like how far we've come, I mean, that seems impossible that could be true, but that's so true for women in many industries. And of course, Cheryl has talked about this in her book, Lean In, and people and women, topping out in many of these industries from nonprofit to traditional business, typically at 20%. For me, it's, I've been given and so lucky to have worked with great people. I want to be able to give back of myself in that way. I always think, when people talk about mentorship, one thing I tell people quite often is it's really important to take advice from people who know you really well. The best advice comes from people who know you really well. And so I encourage people to seek out mentorship in places that are not, that might even be unlikely. So I have people on my team, who work in my organization that are mentors to me, that are willing to, give me, and who know me really well, and who give me feedback on, hey, I don't think this was communicated the way you thought it was going to be communicated, or, hey, let me give you some insight about why this team member, doesn't feel comfortable giving the direct feedback that they want to give, or whatever it might be. I've found that mentorship is not just, an email off to like the CEO of a company of, will you be my mentor? Will you meet me for coffee? Like those things rarely pan out as valuable for people. Where mentorship can really be amazing for people is, one, do you have the time to invest in it? If you have the time and the interest to invest in it, to get to know people and to really understand what drives them and give them great advice, it can be amazing. And so I think about like, one, be a reader. Be a learner. There's so much content out there. The pandemic has also really exploded and expanded like the types of content that we can access and the types of content people are producing on everything from career to real estate to, cooking to whatever it is. And so I always encourage people like, be a reader, go Google stuff, go learn stuff, right? Read articles, and two, be a learner. Always want, be a lifelong learner, someone who's really dedicated to always being curious and learning something out there. There's nothing worse than, a person reaching out to me cold to ask me a question about a major life stage or a major life like decision that they're making. And I'm very hesitant to weigh in because I don't necessarily know if that's the right decision. And all advice is based on the context of a person's individual experience. So there's no question that like we all have a duty. Anyone who's on this call, anyone who's listening here, you and I mean, we all have a duty to help bring people up. One of the top realtors that I know, who is an amazing person, one of the most humble people, we were just texting right before this, one of the most incredible individuals I met, mentors an up and coming agent. And this person is so dedicated to opening doors for this other agent and getting this person access and learning and resources. I'm so inspired by that kind of mentorship because this person knows that person really well, knows the right rooms that they should be in. And if they had a +1 to an event with, name your luminary or famous person, they would give that +1 to this person they're mentoring. It's one of the most inspiring mentor relationships that I've seen. This person lobbies for, advocates for this individual. And I think, this is one of the most successful people in real estate who's built their career brick by brick. If that person has the time to invest in someone else and growing someone else's business, we all have the time and really owe it to ourselves and to, those who have had less privilege to be in the rooms that we've been in, or less connection or connectivity. We owe it to them and to ourselves to be able to give back in that way. So I think it's a really important question. Matters a lot to me.
Yeah. And I love I mean, what I'm hearing is like often the best mentor-mentee relationships, there's two-side learning happening, right? And then to your point, like you don't become a mentor with a title. And so anybody can serve that role. And it's often more about how well they know you and then how honest they're going to be in terms of, feedback. Because, if a mentor is not giving it to you straight, good, bad, or indifferent, there's probably limited learnings there.
I think you got to look for mentorship everywhere and be observant. And I mean, part of this is like, even just the people that you work with, the people that you're in meetings with, like watch them, listen to them. Clients that you have, clients can be mentors, right? I know people whose clients have pushed them to think about, hey, you got to reinvent this area of your business. Think about this. Let me help you think through it. Or, people that have clients that work in, the digital space or technology industry or marketing and branding, thinking about that dimension of it. I mentioned I had a baby last year. I mean, I even think of like our baby as a mentor to me. Because I move, and you know this about me, right? I move really fast. Sometimes I even move too fast, and she moves slowly because she's like a little one, right? Yeah. And so she teaches me every day, like those are lessons that I take with me to work, which is, okay, I got to slow down. I've got to give people a moment, right? I can't just like speed through everything, and I need to savor it and enjoy it. Save the moment, take it in. And so I try to just see every moment. Like I've learned so much from you in this conversation. It's such a privilege to reconnect with you after, after our time working together. And it's really wonderful to be able to join you and see you in this incredible role, in a massive global company, like really driving this forward. And I'm really proud of that I could be someone who sat next to you and a friend to you, and you're an inspiration to me and a mentor to me. So thank you.
Well, I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. But yeah, I mean, likewise, we've talked a bunch, like we need to get together in person when we can do that. But it's awesome to see. You've always been such a fantastic people first leader. And I think real estate's always needed that because of a lot what we talked about, but particularly in this moment. And the market's great. I mean, it's generally a good time for real estate agents, but there's so much that we're all carrying around in terms of mental stress and, getting your kids back to school and all those things. And I'm sure your agents really appreciate that you're going to be there for them from a business perspective, but arguably more important, especially right now, is just that personal, and this story you said of Joanne around giving you the feedback of like, give yourself a break, right? Those are the kind of things that often stick with us versus the kind of really tactical business. Hey, you could be doing this a little bit better, right? Because those
be kind to yourselves, have fun, live it up. Like we go around once. So, and we all know how precious life is. So I think that's if there's one thing that anyone remembers or takes away from this, I hope it's that. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining in. It'll be on YouTube in our Facebook group as well. And so, all right. Thanks, Libby.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.